Hi, everyone. In his castle, he was the king, and yet he learned quickly that he was also a nobody. Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamb, who had previously served in illustrious pulpits, was a celebrated Jewish philosopher, recognized scholar, author, and orator, assumed the presidency of Yeshiva University in 1976. On the first day of his new job, undoubtedly spent meeting with influential titans of the Orthodox Jewish community, with the best and the brightest scholars in a myriad of disciplines, and planning for the bright future of Orthodoxy in America, Rabbi Lamb got hungry and took a lunch break. Entering the cafeteria, he took a tray, he chose his lunch, and approached the cashier to check out. And suddenly he discovered that he had forgotten his ID and was responsible to produce it prior to his paying for his food. The cashier tried to help him out. "Are you a student?" the cashier asked. "No," he replied. "Are you a professor?" "No," he said. So the cashier said, "So you're not a student and you're not a professor, then you must be a nobody." "You're right," Rabbi Lamb said. "I'm a nobody." I found myself thinking about whether it was more important to be a somebody than a nobody, or if at times anonymity is actually more desirable by Hashem. On the one hand, my father, Zichrono Livracha, would often remind us of the importance of being a somebody. He made it a habit of quoting the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, which states, "Bimkom she'ein anashim hishtadel lios ish," when in a place where there are no men, man up. He would remind us that Moshe Rabbeinu, in what would later be his first act on behalf of his Jewish brothers, saw that there was nobody to rise to the occasion. Vayar ki ein ish. And then he acted, smiting the Egyptian. Yes, my father would say, you need to be a somebody and you need to rise to the occasion. And he wasn't alone. How many Jewish and even secular modern psychology books focus on the development of a person's self-esteem? Heinz Kohut developed a whole school of psychological development surrounding, and Rabbi Dr. Abraham J. Twersky wrote over 50 books primarily dedicated to the notion of the importance of self-esteem, or valuing the fact that each of us is a somebody. So clearly being a somebody beats being a nobody, no? And yet at the same time, throughout this week's parsha, we seem to keep getting little ongoing hints from Hashem that maybe it's better to be a nobody. When the Torah describes the highest person in the nation, the Melech, the king, the Torah warns us, Levilti rum levavo me'achav, to be careful, lest this heart become haughty. And Ramban quickly highlights the fact that this warning against thinking too much of oneself is not limited to the king. It applies to everybody. And we start with the king, since he might be the first to think he's a somebody instead of a nobody. Yes, it seems that at times it's better to be a nobody than a somebody. So which side is right? And while we're at it, the concern of the king's self-importance is later decried by Shmuel Hanavi, who chides the people for asking for a king by noting that the king will use all the people and all of the resources among the people and in the land for his own purposes. It's as if Shmuel again warns the people of the dangers of their appointing somebody to be a someone. But if it's a mitzvah to appoint the king, why would Shmuel deride this? What's wrong with being a somebody? And later in the parsha, we find another opportunity to see one's insignificance, where being a nobody seems to beat being a somebody. You see, in the context of describing the Arei Miklat, the famed cities of refuge, for those who might have killed someone inadvertently, about whom we're told to prepare signs so that no one needs to look at them, rendering the murderer, the accidental and inadvertent murderer, a nobody in society, we find a promise that if we keep Hashem's word and we love him, then Hashem will add 3 more Arik Miklat in the future. And so it begs the question, if we listen to Hashem, why would we have an environment where we would need more Ari Miklat? Shouldn't the lack of awareness of the value of life be diminished in the future? Who are the assumed somebodies then, who will need the kapara, the atonement of galus, of being sent into exile, to be nobodies? My Rebbe Rav Shachta used to recount the story told by Rav Moshe of Kutzi in his introduction to his Sefer Mitzvos Gadol the Smag, who, when he completed the compilation of his account of the 613 mitzvos, dreamt that he left out the mitzvah of V'ram levavecha v'shachachtas Hashem, that your heart will become haughty and you'll forget Hashem. Rav Moshe of Kutzi realized that this prohibition represented a major principle in one's Yirah Shamayim and one's fear of heaven, and so he reintroduced it into his work. And perhaps that's the difference between being a somebody and a nobody. You see, the prophet Yirmiyahu Hanavi notes that a person shouldn't glorify himself with his wisdom or his strength or his wealth. The only glory that one should glorify himself with is that of how much he tries to understand Hashem. From conception until the end of one's life, being a somebody is about playing the role that Hashem expects of you. When the kings of our people, or even the princes and princesses who make up the Jewish people, realize that the supreme King of Kings is to be glorified, and that our real glory comes from him, then we won't become haughty, but we will be a somebody. And that was the expectation of Hashem in our parsha when he commanded the concept of a king. Rav Avram Yitzchak HaKohen Kook notes that the ideal mission of the king was to lead the people in following Hashem's master plan, even outside the spiritual centers, even when working the land. Unfortunately, when the people made their request of Shmuel, there was no mention of Hashem in the king's job description. Absent Hashem in his direction, a somebody quickly deteriorates into a nobody. The Netziv adds that ideally one would indeed take a more private, perhaps nobody opportunity in public life. However, when it comes to serving Hashem's will, when, as my father quoted, it's a b'makom she'ein anoshim situation where there's nobody else around, then one cannot also continue to be a nobody. For Hashem's plan, you need to rise up. You need to be a somebody. And the same can be said in the Ir Miklat, the cities of refuge in the future. Rav Moshe Sternbach notes that refuge can not only protect those who murdered inadvertently, but also protect those who are righteous and serve Hashem out of love. In fact, great tzaddikim, both Litvish and Hasidic, would go into self-imposed exile to engage in self-introspection and learn to serve Hashem even more completely. Maybe it will be these tzaddikim that will be serviced by the Ari Miklat of the future. People walking as nobodies on their own to strengthen their resolve to be somebodies in their attachment to Hashem. The late great Rabbi Beryl Wein spoke about the famed Gaon of Vilna, who undertook a personal exile time. It's not clear whether the Gaon did so for 3 or 5 years, but either way, he didn't advertise that he was the renowned scholar he already was, and he was not usually recognized as such. After all, there were no pictures. And so therefore, he would travel in his wanderings, and he attempted to discover not only rare manuscripts, but also rare people, those whom he felt had a potential for Torah greatness. And many times there are great people who find themselves in small and unknown communities. They can easily become discouraged and feel that they are never going to get anywhere. And the Gaon looked for such people, and he attempted to strengthen them in knowledge of the Torah. While appearing as a nobody, he looked at their potential to be somebodies who would contribute greatly to the world. In the course of his travels, the Vilna Gaon once asked his Gentile wagon driver to stop at the side of the road so that he, the Gaon, could daven. And as he was praying, the wagon driver whipped the horse and disappeared in a cloud of dust, taking with him all of the Gaon's meager possessions. Here he was stranded, with absolutely nothing to his name, nothing, that is, except for his tefillah, his prayer. Think about that story the next time you travel. You land in an airport and you wait for your luggage to appear on the carousel. You follow the bags as they go round and round until your neck is sore. And then when that last piece of luggage has been removed and your suitcase is nowhere in sight, you'll have to walk down those long, endless corridors for the lost and found, at which time you'll hear that your luggage went to Omaha. You're not in Omaha. Suddenly you can feel alone, like a nobody, holding on to nothing. If you remember that the greatest somebodies are those who realize that in their travels or in their homes, they are nobody without staying close to the mission of Hashem for them, then that is when you can begin to identify with the Creator. The airline can take everything away from you, but your connection to Hashem, to the Shekhinah, stays with you. Instead of feeling humiliated by your helplessness and dependency, you will come to see it as a way to connecting to Hashem. Years later, after his first initial opportunity to be recognized as a nobody in Yeshiva University, Rabbi Lim discovered that the world-renowned actor Harrison Ford became his new neighbor. fresh off his recently released movie, Star Wars. Then 35-year-old Harrison Ford was excited. And when he met Rabbi Lamb on the floor of his building, he froze because he saw that Rabbi Lamb didn't recognize him. Do you know who I am? The movie star asked the unimpressed rabbi. No, Rabbi Lamb said. Do you know who I am? Our challenge is not to chase being a somebody as they do in Hollywood, or hide as a nobody as many try to. Instead, our job is to do as my father said, to live as an ish, a person whose entire being is aligned with Hashem's master plan. That is, after all, who we am. Wishing you and yours a Shabbat Shalom and a Shabbat Shalom to all.